So look, I would like to just start with some basic things, and then I'll come to the main point. Of course, the first topic, which is sources, right? We'll start from there, right? So basically, like all of you, I believe that you must have at least gone through the syllabus once, what are the things which are there in the syllabus, and in fact what pattern we are going to follow. Like let me make it also very clear. We'll start of course with the paper 1, and we'll cover first the ancient and then medieval, and then we'll go for the paper 2. So in paper 2, most probably we'll go for the world first, and then we'll come to the modern. So the procedure or the process what we are going to follow, that's going to include in this way ancient, medieval, maybe modern, modern world, and then we'll come to modern India. There is certain connection between modern world and India, and in fact if you're having a better understanding of modern world, so that is definitely helping you to to some extent to understand modern India also. This is the reason because of what we are going to follow this particular thing, right? Now certain things like that you should understand. There are a couple of things like such as what is history, that's one question, and in fact we have certain discussion over that also, that what is history, or let's say how to understand it. And in fact there are various things like that should keep in mind. So let me revise them once, and I'll come to the first topic. So the first thing what I had been discussing, right, that is what is history. What is history? That's the first question which was taken by me, right? When it comes to the first question, what is history? So as I told you that history is not merely the study of the events that have happened in past, rather it is a process through which we try to understand the various transformations on the changes in the coming into the society. So the moment it comes to the attempting this question, so always you need to keep in mind that the most important thing for me, for us, is to understand the change and continuity. So always try to understand like the subject with respect to this, the change and continuity. Of course, the society does not remain same, rather it is changing. And in fact, here as per Rumela Thapar, that's a very important argument or the important statement given by her. Undoubtedly we try to understand the change and the continuity, right? But it is not true that everywhere the change or the change has followed the similar pattern. Of course, different societies having different kind of changes. So this is the reason because of what, if you see the European history, in that case you cannot say that the same developments have taken place in India. Though I hope you must be understanding that there is an effort specifically by the Marxist scholars where they have tried to follow the same change. Okay, the way Europe is changing, like some of the Indian scholars, Indian Marxist scholars have also tried to understand the change in the similar way. Now it is not completely correct. But basically, while reading history, we have to keep in mind that we have to understand the change in the continuity. Where the change in the continuity is specifically in society. That's the most important thing. Now, when it comes to society, right, you should always keep in mind that in society there are various institutions, and these institutions may be political institution, may be economic institution, may be social institution, right, may be cultural institution, and to some extent we can say even the religious institution. I've been keeping always the religion as a separate category, not including the religion in the cultural aspect, or let's say in the social aspect. Why? Because it's very important in history, and that's the reason because of what we have to keep in mind, that we have to study the religion separately. So basically these are the various dimensions of the society, and basically in these dimensions of the society you find certain changes. And in fact when it comes to the polity, economy, society, culture and religion, everywhere you can find one thing, that within them also certain institutions are there, and these institutions are also not similar, rather they are also changing, right? You must have noticed, of course, when we started in the prehistoric times, the political institutions were very different. You must have studied or must have heard of these words like the kinship society or the tribal society, kinship, then the chiefdom, and then finally the state society. So these are various institutions within the society, within the polity that could be noticed. In the same way, we can discuss about the economy, and in economy also you must have seen certain institutions such as like guild is one institution in the society. But you can't say that the guild has appeared whenever there is any form of economy, guild is appearing. No, this is incorrect. Of course, when there is an ideal condition for the appearance of guild, then only the guilds are coming. So this is how we can find that various institutions are coming in the economy, various institutions in society, such as in Indian context we can talk about caste, varna and all such kind of thing. So basically they are part of the social institution. Then this is how we can find the cultural and the religious institutions as well, right? So What is history? That's an effort, like, to understand the change and continuity in society with respect to the various dimensions, because here also we find the various institutions are there and they do not remain same, rather they are changing. And as per the changing institution in the society, we do keep them in different like time frames, which are known as ancient, medieval, modern and world. Jab institutions like, if they do remain same, in that case we believe, or if there is no major change, in that case we consider them as part of one period. But whenever we find like, kind of greater changes coming, and then we always say, it's a kind of, new era had started, because normally like there's one perception. How many of you are from history background? Okay, a good number of people from history background. ठीक है, आप भी हैं history background से नहीं? You're also from history background, yes. So जो लोग history background, लोग डर रहे हैं लगता है नहीं? People are scared कि I'll start asking questions, ठीक है. इसमें कुछ लोग तो मैंने target कर रखा है पहले ही, ठीक है. खासकर those who have done their masters, ठीक है. They are already the targeted people, ठीक है. क्योंकि masters में I expect that you do have some, or you should get some specialization of the subject. And that's really a good thing that most of you are coming from history background. So if you all are like majority of you are coming from history backgrounds, in that case what happens, like of course you feel a kind of convenience whenever somebody has studied history in your, in their graduation or let's say masters. So I always, and if they are coming up with this question that whether they should go for the history optional or not, so I think that question was really a kind of, frustrating question for me. If you have studied history, I think you should go for it. And every year, like people are scoring very good in history. It is all depending on your own potential and the capability that whether you are able to score good or not. ठीक है, आपकी capability पे depend करती है. ये UPSC के उस पे depend नहीं करता. Like if you haven't understood the subject properly, if you do not have the skill of writing good answers, in that case you can't expect very good marks. That's the reason, because of what you focus on, conceptual clarity first, and then only, of course, like there are certain content which needed to be produced, right? So this is one dimension which you need to know, that what is history is nothing but the understand the change and the continuity in the various dimensions of society. That is one thing that we had to cover, right? Now moving to the next part. Acha, like I'll be discussing certain things, like of course you might feel very bored like in couple of early minutes, क्योंकि जो लोग पढ़ चुके हैं उनको लगेगा कि यार ये क्या है, ये सब तो हम जानते हैं, बचपन से जानते हैं, ठीक है. और आजकल एक ऐसा सब्जेक्ट है जो तो चाय दुकान वाले भी जानते हैं, खासकर वहाँ बैठने वाले लोग, ठीक है. Now the second thing, what is history? So that's ultimately the combination of two things, sources and historians, right? So this you should understand very categorically, and I'm telling you that like gradually the expectation from you with respect to this is changing. I think instead of believing on me, you can cross check the answer scripts of the people, those who have really scored very good, and in that case you all may notice that they do include the historians. Good number of historians or their names, their ideas, their arguments in their answer. It has really become a very important part, and that's how I must say, or that's why I must say that never ever try to ignore this part. Ki, "Arey, theek hai yaar, if I'm not writing historians, that's quite okay." You have to write the name of historians, and it does not mean you are supposed to write the name of historians the way you had been mentioning the name of historians in your graduation or let's say masters. That's a very different thing. There we study everything with respect to what? With respect to the historians. Here, of course, wherever, it's not applicable everywhere. Now, let me tell you why the historians, or let's say what is historiography, how should we understand this? There are couple of topics where you can find great amount of debate. Isn't that true? There are certain, topics in history where there is much debate, and wherever you find the debate is there in the history, there the name of or the reference of historians are very important. And in fact, in this particular subject, I always feel this positive part that nothing you need to write from your own side, because whenever you have been giving any conclusion, any remark, you don't need to write anything from your side. Rather, what you are going to do, you will be just mentioning a historian and be writing, okay, this argument or this statement had been given by them. So this is how you should have a kind of balance of different kind of views, and that's called as historiography. Now, this historiography becomes more important specifically in the areas where the debate is there, and in fact, if debate is there, so that answer won't be completed without the name of the historians. But there are certain topics where there is no much debate. So where there is no much debate, so if you have been skipping the name of historians, so in that case it is quite okay. Like now, right now, there are many people, they are supposed to write the mains and they are coming and they are asking the question, because now they also have started understanding that what is the importance of historiography in history. So now they are asking another question, that whether are we supposed to mention the name of historians even in world history also. So in world history, you can really skip that part, because the expectation from you is very less, and frankly speaking, the expectation from you is pretty less in paper 2 itself. Okay? The kind of specialization they are expecting from you in paper 1, like they are not expecting the same kind of specialization in paper 2, and the evaluation is still being done in the line of in the line of general studies, I must say. So I must say that there are two things that you need to keep in mind, and I'll discuss about that probably, like okay, that two things, okay. And what is this? Like one which is known as the vertical study, okay, and one which is known as the horizontal study. Okay. So when it comes to horizontal study, what is vertical study? That is applied in paper 1. What is this vertical study? So since here we have been covering a broader time frame, and this is the reason because of what we don't need to connect the development, like from the development in any particular region with the developments in the other region, right, or any other part of the world, because at that point of time the connections were a bit less, and this is the reason because of what, while studying paper 1 specifically ancient and medieval, our approach will be to go vertical, to go for a vertical study. But the moment it comes to paper 2, here the horizontal study, like this idea works. Why? Because here, as I just now had been telling you, that why we are going to keep the world history like earlier, before, or let's say before the modern one, modern India, because if you have really studied the world history, in that case you can really make the connection between the world and the modern India. You all know that whatsoever developments were there in modern India during the colonial period, like they were greatly like impacted by the other developments in the other developments which were happening in the, let's say, USA, or let's say Europe. Can somebody connect, like the European history with the modern Indian history? Sorry, American history with the modern Indian history? Any connection between European history, sorry, American history and the modern Indian history? Why am I telling you this horizontal pattern should be followed here? So I am just trying to give one example. USA and India, कोई connection आपको दिखता है इसमें?
The Anglo-French had conflict in Carnatic was a theater of the US conflict.
I think it was more in a reverse manner, rather than like the impact of this could be noticed over there. That I don't believe. Of course, the third Carnatic war, what you are referring, that was more the impact of, let's say, the things which were happening in Europe precisely, and then in USA, and then in India, right? But do you know the connection between the American War of Independence, that's also known as American Revolution, with respect to the India?
Indian Congress started stolen.
कब हुआ था American Revolution? What was the period of American Revolution? 17? देखिए कैसे 1774, एक साल थोड़ा पीछे धकेल लेते हैं, 1773 कर लेते हैं, ठीक है, 1773 to 1776. And do you know India had played the biggest role in American Revolution? How come? What was the commodity which was exported from India that had created this much chaos? Tea. Most important. I think most of you must have heard of Boston Tea Party. So when it comes to the Boston Tea Party, that tea was ultimately taken from India itself. Why? Because there was excessive tea in India and there was no consumer for that. So British government thought, why not to consume this tea where? In USA. भेज दिया यहाँ से. It was sent to USA. But the people in USA had this problem. Why? Because this was the violation of the Navigation Act. As per the Navigation Act, the commodities could be brought only from, or any commodity could have been brought only from Britain. That is how the Navigation Act was. But then in order to benefit the company, what happened? It was sent directly from India. So American people had problem with this, कि आपको अपनी ज़रूरत है. So then what you did, like when it is about you, so what you did, you have just violated the Navigation Act. And when we wanted the violation of this, you never did that. And in fact, I am giving one example that sugar was one important commodity consumed in USA. And sugar was mostly produced in the Caribbean countries. But do you know one thing? They could not purchase the sugar directly from the Caribbean countries. They needed to purchase it via Britain. क्यों? Because there were 5 British capitalists, those who had their sugar mills over Caribbean countries, and in order to benefit them, like this act was applied, which is known as Sugar Act, कि they needed to buy it directly from the Britain, not from the, like they needed to buy it from the British capitalists, not from the Caribbean countries. So they said कि why are you violating this, like violating this navigation act? Ideally you are not supposed to do that. So it was taken as a challenge, and that's how they started, like, you know, picking up the boxes of the tea, or started throwing it in the sea. So that's how I can make several such connections, and this is the reason, because of what I told you, that the horizontal connections are there. So always try to understand the paper too, not only with respect to, let's say, the past, like, you know, what kind of horizontal connections were there in the past, but sometimes, like, you know, this is also helping you to understand the IR. अगर आप, like, you know, if you have been trying to understand India's relationship with China or India's relationship with the other countries, so there also, like, this understanding is helping you. So this kind of connections you need to make in paper 2, जो काफ़ी help करेगा आपको answers में, मतलब marks improve करने में. So the paper 2 is not precisely the study of history. In paper 2 you need to make some good connections with the modern sort of things also, or let's say what is there in the current scenario. So that's how in paper 2 we are going to follow a different pattern, right? So anyways, I had been discussing about that particular idea, that okay, debate is there, वहाँ पे तो चीज़ें बहुत clear है. There are certain, you know, topics which are very simple, and we don't need to follow any debate as such over here. So in there, like in those kind of topics, if you are not mentioning it, that's quite okay. ठीक है, you can skip it. But still, when you are making the conclusion in such kind of topics which is debateless, in that case you can do one thing, that you can write the name of or mention 1 or 2 historians. That's adding some value, or let's say it is actually enhancing the quality of your answer. So that could be followed here. So this is how you remember that sources, you know, and historians. So basically the moment it comes to debate, so it is very much depending, the debate is very much depending on what? Like it is depending on the various schools. Like when it comes to the schools, like, you know, I have already discussed about, like, you know, various kind of schools, such as the various school. So that includes basically the, like, Cambridge, or let's say initially start from Imperialist, which is presently known as the Cambridge school. Then I talked about the Nationalist, then the Marxist, then Subaltern, then Annal school, then Revisionist, and so on. So these are certain historiographical groups, like, or the schools that we need to keep in mind. So basically the moment it comes to debate, you need to always see it with respect to the schools. In that case, it is going to be easier for you to remember the name of historians. Or if in certain situation you don't remember the name of historians, in that case you can even refer the name of schools, right? So that's how also you can manage your work. So basically this is one dimension, and that you need to keep in mind. Of course we have to, like, you know, we have to let's say refer the name of historians specifically when it comes to questions related to debate. That's another thing that you have to keep in mind. Now one more thing, like, you know, when it comes to history, like history cannot be ever an objective subject, okay? So you please come out from that particular perception that history, or there is great amount of objectivity in the subject. Because why am I telling you all this? Because whenever I teach this subject, like some certain students specifically from the engineering or let's say science backgrounds, they are in much problem, ठीक है? उनको बड़ी प्रॉब्लम होती है, बड़ी कोफ्त होती है उनको कि यार वहाँ तो 2 और 2 4 होता है, यहाँ पे 5 कैसे हो जाता है? Got the point? यहाँ पे कुछ भी हो सकता है, क्या कुछ भी इसलिए हो सकता है क्योंकि it's all about the changes in the society. And do you really think that the society in one night is going to change altogether? No, no. Society cannot change in one night. So the changes are always gradual. And that's the reason, because of what the most important word which is applicable to history is transformation, and only on certain occasions, like we use another word that's called as revolution, right? So when there is a drastic change, and the change all of a sudden, we have been using the term revolution. And then most of the time you can find the gradual changes are there, and that's the reason because of what we can talk about, like, you know, the continuous changes, or let's say transformation. So this is happening in a very slower manner. So always keep in mind that like society is gradually changing, and it is also not necessary that if one society is changing, at the same time the another society should also change by following the first one. That's not possible. You know, again I'll put one example here. When I discuss about, let's say, Neolithic, okay? So when I discuss about the coming of Neolithic in Indian context, I talk about Mehergarh, which went through this transformation somewhere in 7000 BC. But whenever it comes to the South India, ठीक है, when did this transformation take place? संगम में Neolithic transition कब होता है? What was the period for the Neolithic transition in Sangam period? Those who have studied history, anybody having ancient as specialization? अभी होगा भी तो कोई नहीं बोलेगा, ठीक है? हाँ? नहीं, आप बहुत पीछे ले गए इसको. Have you ever heard of one site that's called as Mount sites? Robert Bruce Foot. सुना है? ये राहुल नहीं है, नाम तो सुना होगा. This is Robert Bruce Foot, father of Indian archaeology, a geologist, right? So उन्होंने बोला कि this is the Mount site is nothing but the Neolithic site. And what is surprising that it did not have the same features with the other Neolithic sites, but still it is kept in the Neolithic sites on the basis of specifically tools and the life ways, and like the period was somewhere around 1500 BC. So look at the difference when you talk about this Neolithic transition in the northwestern part of India. It had happened somewhere in 7000 BC. When you talk about the Neolithic transition in South India, that was happening somewhere in 1500 BC. कितना difference है देखिए, ठीक है? So in both the places the transition is quite similar, ठीक है? That's how we have been keeping it in the Neolithic transition, but the period is very different. And in fact it hasn't followed this exactly same pattern. आपको पता है इंडिया में 7 अलग-अलग तरीके के Neolithic transitions जो है, या 6 या 7 अलग-अलग तरीके के Neolithic transitions है. When you talk about this transition in Burjahom and Gufkaral, ठीक है? That's a very different kind of transition. There are certain features which are noticed in Burjahom and Gufkaral that could not be noticed in Mehergarh, and that the changes which were there in the eastern part of India, precisely like Mirzapur region, they were very different from the Mehergarh changes. And so you can imagine that within India, if you talk about this Neolithic transition, these many differences are there. So you all can understand that if we'll be talking about the history specifically of the prehistory, like in the world context, in that case how much differences must be there. So this is the reason Indian society or Indian history remains very different from the European history. तो वो हमें अलग से पढ़ना है, that we need to keep in mind, right? So this is the thing that you need to keep in mind. Objectivity is not possible. So if you do have that kind of, let's say, mindset, साइंस वाला माइंडसेट, तो प्लीज़ कम आउट फ्रॉम दैट साइंस वाला माइंडसेट. वो इधर काम नहीं करेगा, ठीक है? इधर जो है थोड़ा हमें फ्लेक्सिबल होना पड़ता है. जैसे मैं कहता हूँ ना अक्सर, जो सबसे बड़ी बात है, दैट्स द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग, द मोमेंट यू वांट टू बिकम ए सिंगर, यू कांट बिकम ए सिंगर, ठीक है? ऑफ कोर्स दैट फील शुड बी देयर, राइट? गेटिंग माई पॉइंट. जैसे मैं अगर गाना शुरू कर दूँ, तो जब मैं कॉलेज में पढ़ता था, कभी कभी मैं गाना गाता था तो मेरे पड़ोसी नाराज़ हो, पड़ोसी मतलब जो मेरे फ्रेंड्स थे, नाराज़ हो जाते थे. और नाराज़ बोले तुम्हें म्यूज़िक का कोई सेंस ही नहीं है, तुम्हारे वॉइस कभी ऊपर नीचे जाती ही नहीं है, एक ही टोन में गाते हो, ठीक है? तो समझ नहीं थी मुझे. What I'm trying to suggest you that when you have been reading history, so please try to be in history, try to think in history. In that case, you'll start using the terminologies and everything related to them. Got the point? वो बहुत important है कि you keep on thinking, or you, let's say, you think in this particular subject. In that case, like it will be easier for you to cope up with the subject. If you won't think within the periphery of the subject, in that case it will be very problematic. Feel बहुत जरूरी है, ठीक है? The moment you feel it, ठीक है? The moment you feel it, then only like it is easier for you. Just जैसे कुछ लोग डांस करते हैं, तो ऐसा नहीं होता स्टेज पे आते ही क्या करते हैं, एकदम स्टेज पे आते ही डांस करना शुरू कर देते हैं. Like first they try to catch the beats of the music, and once they catch the beat of the music, then only they start like performing. So catch the beat, that's very important. थोड़ा इसको ओपन रखना है, थोड़ा खोल के रखना है, ठीक है? चीज़ें एकदम रिजिड नहीं होना कि आपने कभी ये बोला तो अभी आपने ये बात बदल क्यों दी, ठीक है? बहुत कॉन्टेक्स्ट हो सकता है, कॉन्टेक्स्ट में बदल सकते हैं, वो सारी चीज़ें ध्यान में रखनी है. सो ओके, दिस इज सर्टन ऑफ लाइक सर्टन थिंग्स लाइक वी हैड ए काइंड ऑफ डिस्कशन ओवर इट, राइट? नाउ लेट्स गो टू द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग, and that's the first topic of ours, that's sources. But before I come to the sources, one more dimension I would like to discuss briefly, and then I'll come to the first topic of the subject, right? Now what is this dimension? The moment you understand history, as I told you, that is basically the combination of sources and the historians, right? But the moment it comes to the evolution of the society, in this evolution, the geography of any particular region does play a very important role. I think most of you must be convinced with this, okay? Most of you very much convinced with this idea that geography does play a very important role in the evolution of any society, right? So when it comes to understanding the role of geography, I hope you understand, like I hope you all must be knowing that what are the prominent features of the topography, or let's say the Indian geography. So you know that Indian geography is very diverse. In the northern side you find Himalayas, okay. In the northwestern side you find which one? Like let's say this is the Himalayas range, okay, and then this is Aravalli Hills. कैसे जाएंगे यार, इंडिया बड़ा था. I'm talking about Indian subcontinent. I'm not talking about India, ठीक है. So when it comes to Indian subcontinent, this is Hindu Kush. This is Himalayas, right? And then this part, right? Then this part, I must say specifically this part. So I can say this is the upper Gangetic Valley, this is the middle Gangetic Valley, and this is the lower Gangetic Valley that includes even Bengal, or it is it is also called as Eastern India, right? Eastern India. So this is one important feature that you have to keep in mind. Now the region in this particular part is definitely known for many rivers, and in fact you all know that Indus and its tributaries which are here, and in fact this part is also known for many rivers. So of course the Ganga is there, then Yamuna is there, and then many other rivers are there, of course. So this is the most fertile tract of India. From here to here it is the most fertile tract of India, right? Then it comes to the peninsular India. So basically this part is called as the peninsular India. Peninsular India. Okay. So do you really think that the peninsular India would be also fertile similar to the Gangetic plains or the Gangetic valleys? Is it possible? नहीं होगा ना, ठीक है, तो नहीं होगा ये. लेकिन is it also true that there is no patch which is very fertile in this particular part, or there are certain patches which are fertile here, such as Deccan का एक region जिसको आप राइस बोल कहते हैं, ठीक है, that's in Andhra Pradesh. So there is a fertile region in this particular part that's called as the rice bowl, right? So this is one thing. And then you come to South India. When the moment you come to South India, you all know that it is not very fertile, but still there are certain regions, specifically there are certain rivers, right? And these rivers are somehow the river deltas are very fertile. So try to understand this India. If we'll see India, in that case, this is the most fertile part. That's one thing. Like this part is very fertile, this part is very fertile, but it is not applicable to whole this part, right? And then you can say about like here in South India, there are only certain patches, specifically the river deltas are fertile. And then along with this, like let's imagine if this is Gujarat, okay? In that case, there is certain specification of the places like this. What are the specification? They were actually very ideal for what? Trade and commerce. The same can be discussed for this particular part which is known as Bengal, like let's say Hooghly region, or Hooghly region, okay? So this is another part which is very ideal for the trade and commerce. So we can say this region is important for trade, then this region is important for trade, then this region is also important for trade, similar for this region, okay? Okay, these are certain regions which are good for trade, specifically for the sea route trade. These are good for agriculture once again, right? Then again certain patches are there good for agriculture. Now the history of this part, or geography of this part is a bit dicey. And in fact one question has been asked, and in fact the Janta was very paresan after seeing this question. When the question was asked, like the Indus cities or the Harappan cities were based in arid and semi-arid regions, right? So when this question was asked, some people were very paresan ki how to write this answer, because actually it is not fit as per the ideal concept, because if it is falling in the arid and semi-arid region, in that case it was not possible to have a civilization like IBC. So you are not supposed to follow or write your answer in the same line, rather you need it to counter that idea. Why? Because there was one point where this particular area was very fertile, right? But then the same thing, or the fertility of the soil of this region was not continued, and later on certain problems appeared that will like understand while understanding the history also, right? While understanding the history of IVC specifically. This is mota moti the geography of India, right? And the development of India has very much depending on this. Now, how? I'll be putting up certain example. I'll be giving up certain examples to make you understand how come like it is having an impact. So first of all, when it comes to Himalayas, so you all can understand that nobody could have really crossed it, okay? And this is the reason you do not find a single invasion from that side. It has never happened. So China also had very powerful dynasties. I think most of you must have heard of Han dynasty. Have you heard of Han dynasty? And in fact, because of Han only, the Kusanas are moving from here. The Kusanas are coming to India, but they did not come from this side, rather they are coming from this side. Why? Because it was not possible to cross this region, and that's how India was safe from this side, and nothing has happened in this particular part, right? So most of the invasions have taken place from this particular side. Reason is very simple, right? Most of the invasions are taking place from this side. Why? Because Hindu Kush range was as such, which could be crossed through some passes. नाम तो सुना होगा, Khyber, Bolan, Gomal, these were the passes, right? Have you ever been to the hilly areas? कभी गए हैं? ट्रैक पे कितने लोग गए हो? कभी हिली एरियाज में ट्रैक किया है? सब खाली यूपीएससी में लगे। अरे जिंदगी और भी बाहर है यूपीएससी के, ठीक है? तो ऐसा मत करो यार, थोड़ा थोड़ा बीच में एंजॉय भी क्या करो, थोड़ा बाहर जाओ, घूमो फिरो, माइंड फ्रेश होता है उससे। हाँ, छुट्टी लेने वाले लेके चले जाते हैं, ठीक है, जज्बा चाहिए। हाँ, अरे कोरोना ये सब धोखा है यार, सब धोखा है। मनाली वनाली तो वो जाते हैं, बच्चे लोग जाते हैं, आगे निकलो मनाली से, ठीक है। मैं बोल रहा हूँ पासेस, क्यों मैं बोल रहा हूँ, इफ़ यू हैव सिंस आई लाइक ट्रैकिंग, ठीक है, तो मैं बहुत ऐसी ऐसी जगहों पे जाता हूँ। बहुत लंबी ट्रैक करने की हालत तो मेरी है नहीं, बूढ़ा आदमी हूँ, ठीक है, so I'm old person, I'm an old person, but still I can do the track of 6-7 kilometers तक का track. What I have noticed that if you'll go to the hilly areas ना, you will find everywhere like the patch for the, or let's say the path for the tracking has been well, ठीक है। आप सोचिए कि यहाँ पे कितने हजारों सालों से लोग चल रहे हैं उन हिली एरियाज में, and that's the reason because of what, like in very rough terrain also you can find that certain paths have been built, or like certain routes have been developed. Why? Because specifically when it comes to this Hindu Kush range, there are those passes, and in fact it must be very difficult, as you can you can understand that the army was crossing through this this part, elephants cross kar rahe hain, horses cross kar rahe hain, so it must be very difficult, but still they were coming. So apart from invasions, we can say that the route was also used for another purpose, that was trade. So invasions and trade, that has always happened from this line, so that can be connected with the political history and the economic history, right? So then even the Aryans, most probably they are also coming from that's the same side. So you always remember that whenever it comes to invasion and trade also, the trade through the land route, it was always happening through this particular side. The next thing that you have to keep in mind, that like if you read the Indian history, specifically the ancient history, you must have noticed, those who have studied, that there is a pattern that could be noticed in this way, right? So let's say IVC people were living in this part, that is known as Sapt Sindhava region. Then the early Vedic people were living in this particular part, okay, that is known as basically the upper Gangetic plains. The moment it comes to the early Vedic people like continued living in the same place, and in fact this is the reason because of what the whole concept of the Harappan Aryan relations has been developed. Have you heard of this particular relation, the Harappan Aryan relation, ever? सुना है कुछ? क्वेश्चन पूछा है ना यूपीएससी ने इस पे? एक साल पूछा है क्वेश्चन, ठीक है, और आगे भी पूछेंगे. दिस इज वन ऑफ द मोस्ट बर्निंग टॉपिक राइट नाउ. द हिस्टोरियंस आर वेरी डेस्परेट टू प्रूव वन थिंग. क्या हो गया अपूर्वा, गुस्से में आ गई हैं आप? अरे मैप ऐसे थोड़ी बनता है एक दिन में, ठीक है, मुझसे आज तक नहीं बना. क्या बोल रहा था मैं? या Harappan Aryan relation. So it has really become very important because nowadays there is an effort by historians to prove that Aryans were actually the indigenous people from this part only, and this is the reason this issue has become one of the burning issues, and that's why I'm telling you that either this year or next year or next to next year, the question is definitely going to come again from this particular topic. So it is one of the most burning topics, and in fact you all should understand that whenever such topics are being asked, so you should not only think in terms of question, you should also think in terms of historiography. Why was this question asked? ठीक है, तो जब आप आंसर लिखते, when you are writing answer, so that idea should be there in the mind that why is this question asked. Don't think that only the question is there and you need to write the answer. After seeing the question, try to understand the hidden idea behind it. There is a particular purpose because of this question has been asked, and mind you, these kind of things are going to disturb you a lot in the ancient section specifically. Modern में, like more or less, we always do have that nationalist perspective or a sort of inclination towards the nationalist one, तो उतना problematic उधर नहीं है, but यहाँ पे है. So yes, Harappan people, then the Rigvedic people, Later Vedic people, Mahajanpada people, right? And then you see the further growth in this particular part in the post-modern and the Gupta period. That kind of development, that kind of movement is there. Then you see another movement towards this direction. Okay? So there are two directions in which like the movement is there, and it is one of the biggest lacuna of Indian history that we always follow these two developments, whether it is incorrect. When the Harappans are there, okay, when the Vedic people are here, that does not mean that the other people were not living here. But then it is so unfortunate that we do not read about the other people. Okay? We always read about Harappans, and then we study about the Vedic people, and we ignore completely that there are certain communities living in the other parts of India. So there is certain limitation also. The sources do not allow us to understand their culture, their society in a pretty good way, and that's also one reason because of what we are not able to, let's say, we are not able to understand about their culture, their society, their political structure in a good way, and that's also one reason. But somehow the ignorance could be also noticed, and why this ignorance is there? The sources are again one important reason. It is always easier to write the history on the basis of literary sources. Right. The moment you start using the archaeological sources, it's going to become tough and tough for you to write the history, and that's how people always go for the easier path. Okay? If somebody is suggesting you just come to me, I'll just teach you for 2 months, and I can get you clear, like I'll facilitate you clearing this UPSC examination. You'll always chase that fellow. यही है ठीक है, अब 2 महीने में यूपीएससी निकलवा रहा है ये कोई बोलेगा कि आइए 1.5 साल में पढ़ाऊंगा आपको यूपीएससी निकले वाला, ये आदमी फ्रॉड लग रहा है, 1.5 साल थोड़ी लगेगा. ठीक है, हमेशा इंसान ईजियर पाथ में जाता है. ठीक है, तो ये मूवमेंट्स है. ओके, सो द मूवमेंट दे आर मूविंग फ्रॉम दिस साइड टू दिस साइड. नाउ व्हाट चेंज मस्ट बी नोटिस. ठीक है, if they are moving, there is a movement from this side to this side, what kind of change can be noticed? Just in one word. जब इस डायरेक्शन में मूवमेंट है तो आप चेंज बताइए. जस्ट टेल मी द चेंज इन वन वर्ड कि व्हाट वुड बी द ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन. सॉरी, आयरन मे बी अवेलेबल एनीवेयर. देयर विल बी more agricultural production. That's also called as surplus. Mind you, this is one important thing as per the Marxists, I believe. Yeah, I accept this, I agree on this, but yes, the moment you move from this side to this side, definitely more agricultural production is there, and this is called as surplus, and that surplus or the creation of surplus in the society does bring certain changes in the society. Got it? Then when it comes to the movement from this side to this side, again you have to understand the reason because of what this movement is there, and one of the prime reason behind this was definitely the trade. South India undoubtedly dominated in trade, right? They always had great excellence in trade, and that's the reason because of what now the movement could be noticed from this side to this side, right? And then it creates a kind of debate over here ki whether the every development that happened in extreme south, which is called as Tamilkam or Tamilam, ठीक है, Did it happen because of the people coming from north? It's a debate. We'll try to take up this debate later on, but you can understand that okay, there is one sort of movement in this particular direction also. Now when I talked about this fertile patch in this particular part, specifically in the rice bowl of Andhra, now it had also a greater impact over the development of history. Can you tell me about one important dynasty which took birth here? गंगा से भी पहले आंध्रा में सबसे पहली डायनेस्टी कौन सी आई थी? विच वन इज द अर्लीस्ट डायनेस्टी दैट कुड बी नोटिस इन आंध्र प्रदेश? विजयनगर कब आई है यार? हाँ, चेरा यहाँ है दोस्त, मैप नहीं देखा ढंग से। हाँ एग्जैक्टली, ये है सातवाहना। आप लोग इग्नोर कर रहे हैं सातवाहना को, मैं बता रहा हूँ आने वाले टाइम पे इट इज़ वन ऑफ द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट डायनेस्टीज फ्रॉम वेयर द क्वेश्चंस आर गोइंग टू कम। सातवाहनास को फॉलो करिए। अभी प्री में 2 क्वेश्चन पूछे थे इन लोगों ने सातवाहना से, नोटिस किया आपने? प्री में 2 क्वेश्चन सातवाहना से, इट मैटर्स। Satavahana, do you know the specification of the Satavahanas? Do you know for how many years they had been ruling on India? मतलब in a particular patch? 450 years. Have you seen any dynasty which had really ruled for such a longer period of time? Mughals कितने साल rule करते हैं? I hope you all must be believing that the Mughals were the most powerful dynasty ever in India. है ना? कितने साल rule किया उन लोगों ने? Like 1526 they started. And from 1526 to maximum we can say कि 1750s, ठीक है, maximum। उसके आगे तो फिर वो लाल किला के अंदर ही जो है जफर साहब घूमते रहते थे, कविताएं लिखते, सॉरी शायरी लिखते थे और उसी के अंदर घूमते रहते थे, ठीक है। तो कितने साल हो गए? 225-230 साल। Mughals undoubtedly they were the most powerful, and powerful not in terms of only army, powerful in terms of the institutions they had, such as Mansabdari, such as the Dehsala system. These are considered to be the institutions, and more or less I can say they have really created a kind of superstructure in Mughal Empire. जो किताब इरफान हबीब साहब ने लिखी है कि द अग्रेरियन स्ट्रक्चर इन मुगल इंडिया, ठीक है, दैट इज कंसिडर्ड टू बी वन ऑफ द बेस्ट वर्क इन द medieval times, specifically in the Mughal times. So if they had created such a great institution, such a great institutions, right, and that's the reason because of what it was one of the longest ruling dynasty. But the Satavahanas managed to rule for 450 years, and that too from here to here, ठीक है. So the whole patch, Andhra, Maharashtra and MP was under their control. And if we'll talk about any other dynasty which had ruled for very longer period of time, so then we can talk about Ahom kingdom, which roughly I can say ruled for 600 years, ठीक है. And I'm telling you this is another dynasty from where you can find frequent questions like in UPSC. अभी मैं बता रहा हूँ, लिख लीजिए, note it down कि the questions are going to come from और इस बार वाले इसमें तो हम मतलब 99.9% है कि अहोम किंगडम पे एक क्वेश्चन होगा इस बार वाले यूपीएससी मेंस में, एकदम 100%, राइट। 1% मैंने अपनी गुंजाइश छोड़ रखी है, 0.1%, ठीक है, स्केप तो रखना होता है ना, भागने का रास्ता कहीं ना कहीं, तो 0.1% मैंने अपने ले रखा है, बट आप इसमें से क्वेश्चन आएगा, राइट। When it comes to the origin of the Satavahanas, why suddenly I did discuss about the Satavahanas? When it comes to origin of the Satavahanas, it's again a very debatable topic in history, and I hope those who have studied little bit history, you all must have heard that Satavahanas were even called as Andhra Bhriti. Andhra Bhriti मतलब क्या होता है कि like they originated from the Andhra, and this is nowadays this is connected from this particular specification of Andhra Pradesh, that since this rice bowl is there, and that's how they had this potential to create the surplus in this particular region, and that's how the possibility is there that the Satavahanas originated in this region because of this particular feature. But later on, in order to control the trade and commerce, they are moving towards this side. So this is one theory, of course I'll be discussing while having our discussion over the Satavahanas, ठीक है. And then when it comes to South India, like what kind of perception you do have for the Cholas, for the Cheras and Pandyas? कैसे थे? राजा थे या फिर जो है ऐसे छोट भैया नेता थे? कैसे थे लोग थे वो लोग? whether they were the proper kings or the normal chiefs or something like that. You all must have studied or must be having this perception that they were the bigger rulers, the Chola, Cheras and Pandyas. Isn't that true? Right. So you can see that they had been glorified a lot, or let's say sometimes they have been overemphasized. But then in the modern historiography, we understand that probably they were not that much, like they never had this much sound rule like the North India. And the reason is very simple, that until and unless you had this potential to collect the surplus in a greater quantity or tax in a greater quantity, you won't be able to establish a proper kingdom. Got my point or not? When you are supposed to run a system, proper system, you should have this ability to collect tax, that too in a greater quantity. When I am telling you that the agriculture is very limited in this particular part, in that case, how come you can expect that they could have really formed a kind of powerful kingdoms? And that's how the earlier notions have changed here. And now we say the Chola, Cheras and Pandyas were nothing more than a chiefdom state, और लेट्स से chiefdom status. सो अभी हमारा परसेप्शन पूरा बदल गया है उनके लिए. तो ये ज्योग्राफी के हिसाब से ये सारी चीज़ें तय हो रही है. दैट्स द ओनली आइडिया व्हाट आई वांटेड टू कन्वे, राइट? So basically geography does play a very important role, and you'll be always keeping in mind that when we are discussing about any particular feature, I always discuss कि okay, it is upper Gangetic plain, or this is lower Gangetic plain, or middle Gangetic plain, this is the peninsular region, this is the Vindhya range. So you should understand कि okay, there are certain specifications of these regions, and as per that only you need to think. So it is always giving you a kind of extra advantage to deal with any question or to think about any question, कि in what dimension the questions are being asked, and many times the questions are being asked to you by linking it with the geographical geographical conditions and all. So that you'll always keep in mind. Is that clear? Okay, fine. So this is one thing that I wanted to discuss, and now let's come out from this and let's enter into the first topic. Sources. This is the easiest topic, right? बस एक ही प्रॉब्लम है, कई बार क्वेश्चन थोड़ा घुमा के पूछ लेते हैं, समझ में नहीं आता. बाकी सब इजी है, बाकी इतनी कोई डिफ़िकल्टी नहीं है इसमें, है ना? Sources, right? So I hope you all must be understanding one thing, that there is no history without sources and historians, right? So we are going to cover one part. The rest is historiography that will keep on covering with every topic. Okay, these are different schools which have been dealing with the history of this particular period in a very different way, that we'll discuss with every topic. But this is one topic which is which is applicable to most of the topics in ancient India. Acha, is anyone having problem with the timeline also? और वो clear है, मतलब timeline मतलब the chronological development in ancient Indian history? Do you have any rough idea कि this is the period of the Mauryans, the Guptas and so on? या वो एक मैं बता दूँ एक बार कर दूँ मैं डिस्कस. चलिए ठीक है, ओके फाइन. So this is believed to be the beginning point of Indian history. Now when it comes to the beginning point of Indian history, let's consider it prehistory. Prehistory. And what is the time for this prehistory? Any idea? Indian prehistory. 3.5 million. बिलियन? अरे नहीं, ज़्यादा हो गया. अगर उतना हो गया होता तो अभी हम उड़ रहे होते, ठीक है. अगर हमारी डेवलपमेंट इतनी पुरानी होती तो अभी तक हम पंख वंख निकल गए होते और अभी तक हम जिधर मर्जी होता उड़ जाता, हमारा ब्रेन एक्स्ट्रा ऑर्डिनरी डेवलप हो गया होता, बहुत पीछे उस डेवलपमेंट में, ठीक है। रफली इन इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट आई कैन से 0.7 million years ago to, as I told you, 1500 BCE. Is that clear? प्री हिस्ट्री जो है हमारा इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट में, what is the time frame of this pre-history? You might have some objection over it because you must have read somewhere like let's say 1.6 million or let's say, पढ़ा है ना? नहीं पढ़ा, अच्छा पढ़ा होगा. Yeah, this is true. That even in Indian context also we do find certain examples. The examples of, let's say, the examples of the prehistoric evidences from the 2 million years ago and so on. Can somebody tell me about the names of these places? वहाँ पे मिलता है हमें बहुत पुराने sites मिलते, पुराने evidences मिलते. किसने किसने ancient पढ़ लिया? Anyone who has covered ancient for the general studies perspective? अभी कोई एक्सेप्ट ही नहीं करेगा. हाँ, मॉडर्न पढ़ा है खाली. अच्छा कोई बात नहीं, मॉडर्न का भी नंबर आएगा. एंशिएंट नहीं पढ़ा किसी ने, ठीक है. हैव यू हर्ड ऑफ वन प्लेस कॉल्ड एज बोरी? दैट्स इन महाराष्ट्र. एंड देन अनदर प्लेस दैट्स कॉल्ड एज पत्नी, PATNE, पत्ने. ये कहाँ है? महाराष्ट्र में ही, ठीक है. So Patni and Maharashtra, these are two such sites available in India which are giving us evidence of the Paleolithic people, that too in 1.6 to 2 million years ago. But since we do have very less such examples, and that's why we believe that probably the Indian prehistory did not start from that particular period of time. So mostly we believe it had started from 0.6-0.67 million years ago, okay, million years ago, to let's say 1500 BC. So this is the time this is the period for the prehistory. Now what is prehistory that you all understand? Like I have prehistory matlab the period where we do have only archaeological sources, right? So basically it's also called as Stone Age. So there was no metal being used by them and only stones were being used by them, though not similar stones were being used by them. They have used different kind of stones. So this is called as the prehistory. And then in the prehistory you actually see the transition from a monkey or from an ape to human being. Okay? This is a transition from this Homo sapiens, the transition from a kind of animal to Homo sapiens. This is the period when this transition had been taking place, and this is the period of this transition. Of course, there are a couple of things that we have to cover. But look at this one thing, it is covering 0.7. that is roughly around 7 lakh years ago to 1500 BC. मोटा मोटी आप मान के चलिए कि here the history is of how many years? 7 lakh years. And how much time you are giving to this? Just 2 classes. Reason? Sources नहीं, ठीक है. There is great lacuna of sources, ठीक है. And that's the reason because of what we are not able to know about this period in a good way. And that's how the minimal efforts had been put or had been given to this part. Questions are also not coming, in a great number as such. And then it was followed by another important development, and that's known as IVC, Indus Valley Civilization. And the period of this can be considered from 3200 to 1700 or 1750 BCE. This is the time frame for this. Now IVC is again known for some of its great specifications, and how exactly it was. Like it was the first urbanized bronze civilization. ठीक है, I have used 3 terms: urbanized, bronze, civilization, right? ये 3 वर्ड समझ में आ गया, IVC समझ में आ गया, ठीक है, बस इतने ही 3 वर्ड समझना है. So it is the first urbanized bronze age civilization. But let me tell you one thing: the discovery of IVC had taken place very late. Can you tell me the period? When did it happen? 1820. आप बहुत 100 साल पीछे ढके. 1920, ठीक है. So this has happened in 1920. And let me tell you, when it was discovered first, majority of the historians or the archaeologists believe that it is a very late civilization. So like the argument which was putting it as an older civilization, even that argument was saying that it was somewhere of 1500 BC. And nobody has realized this, that actually it is such an old civilization. And this is the reason because of what it is, though it is older, but then Indian history had started from this point, which is known as the क्या हाँ किया था काम, उन लोगों ने बताया था कि वहाँ पे कुछ सिविलाइजेशन है, बट दे कुड नॉट टेल अस द राइट टाइम. एंड इन फैक्ट वन मोर थिंग आई शुड टेल यू फॉर IVC. जस्ट नाउ समबडी सेड कि हरप्पा वाज डिस्कवर्ड इन विच ईयर? 1921. But then, as I told you, that majority of the historians had been keeping it a 15th century, the civilization from 15th century BC. And that's the reason because of what the real knowledge of this is coming only around 1950. So we never knew that it is such an developed and urbanized civilization and older as well. ठीक है, पहले हमें लगता था कि वैदिक के ही आसपास है, तो इतनी तवज्जो इसको नहीं दी गई थी या इतनी इंपॉर्टेंस इसको नहीं दी गई थी. तो अच्छा, प्री हिस्ट्री वॉज समथिंग विच वॉज ऑल्सो नॉट बीइंग स्टडीड बाय अस. ठीक है, सो द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ प्री हिस्ट्री हैज ऑल्सो हैपन वेरी लेट. व्हाई? The study of prehistory was also something which took place very late.
So scientific methods have thought about evolved.
आप बताइए. That's it. इंसान को किसने बनाया है? But nowhere actually, even in the European context also, there was no existence of prehistory. Reason? इंसान को किसने बनाया? भगवान ने. तो जब इंसान को भगवान ने बनाया तो आप कैसे बोल सकते हैं कि इंसान यहाँ बन रहे हैं? Got the point or not? In every religious, let's say, concept, there is some sort of notion for the evolution of human being. Hinduism में क्या कहते हैं? Exactly. हिंदुइज्म में कहते हैं हम सब मनु की संतान है. क्रिश्चियनिटी में कहते हैं एडम है, ईव है, सेब खाया, हो गया आगे सब कुछ. ठीक है, तो लोग मानते थे कि हम इंसान अचानक से एक दिन ऐसे ही आ गए थे. ठीक है, ऊपर भगवान ने कुछ भेजा और फिर इधर कुछ हुआ और फिर जो है लोग बढ़ने लगे ऐसा करके मानते थे. सो इवन द लर्नेड पीपल ऑल्सो कुड नॉट बिलीव दैट द ह्यूमन बीइंग हैज अपीयर्ड ऑन दिस वर्ल्ड थ्रू ए ग्रेजुअल एवोल्यूशन. So this particular concept was changed only after the writing of Charles Darwin, ठीक है, The Origin of Species. Then another book was there of Charles Lyell, that's called as the Principles of Geology. So these are couple of books which were written, and then only they have emphasized कि नहीं भाई, there is a gradual evolution. And then they started relating, the archaeologists started relating like this particular theory with what? With the tools that they have found. मतलब they have retrieved the tools, they have found the tools, but they never thought in this line कि this must have been created by human being. वो बोलते कुछ होगा, बाद का होगा, कभी का होगा. ठीक है, but then after they started relating it with that, and that's how there is a still like kind of dearth of information for this particular period. And that's how the beginning of this also could be noticed in the second half of 19th century. So it's a late development, right? This also in 20th century. So I must say कि Indian history started from here. This is a dividing line. ठीक है. Then the Vedic history. ये तो आसानी से आप कह सकते हैं. What is the time frame for this? 1500, 600 BC, right? So this is the Vedic period, and you all know that this is connected with the Aryans, right? Again, this is a misconception that it's all about, all about the Aryans. But if you'll see the development of Indian history, in that case, you should understand one point, since this part was unknown to us, and this is the first topic in Indian history we kept on studying till the middle of 20th century. So our knowledge of the Indian history was slightly, or this part was secluded. It was not there in the history of Indian, in the knowledge of Indian history. So we started from here. And probably this is one reason because of what we have emphasized a lot on the study of Aryan people. हमको लगता है कि जो भी हैं यही हैं, ठीक है. This kind of perception had been built. So this is also one problem with the Indian history, right? So this is all about the Aryans and then Indo-Aryans. वो जो भी debates हम बाद में देखेंगे इसके related, ठीक है. So this is one period. What happened to Aryans? अच्छा, when it comes to the Aryans, just now I had been showing you like the development or the movement of the Aryans from which part? From the northwestern part to the eastern part, right? And in Indian history, since Aryans were the beginning point of Indian history, this is the reason because of what? The historians were continuously chasing the Aryans. Got the point? There are two reasons behind it. First, the Aryans had literary sources. Okay? The Aryans had literary sources. So which one was easier to write, whether it was easy to write the history of the Aryans or the indigenous people who were present in the different parts of India? Of course, Aryans, hai na? So, like one lacuna in Indian history, that while writing the Indian history, we always chase the Aryans. So, Aryans are there in the sub-Sindhava region, early Vedic period. So, we wrote about them. They moved to the upper Gangetic plain. Later Vedic period, we wrote about them. They are moving to the middle and the lower Gangetic plain. That's the Mahajanpada period. We have been writing about them. So, we are just chasing the Aryans. So, when the Aryans are present in the upper, in the sub-Sindhava region, we never write ki what was happening in India in the rest of the parts, मिर्जापुर में या कश्मीर में या डेक्कन में क्या हो रहा है हमें नहीं पता, हम लिखना भी नहीं चाहते उसके बारे में. अभी तो कोशिश कर रहे हैं बट सोर्सेज बहुत कम है. सो दिस इज वन थिंग दैट यू नीड टू कीप इन माइंड. सो आफ्टर द वैदिक, then we reach to another period that's called as Mahajanpada period, right? Mahajanpada period, that is known as the period from 600 to 300 BC. Acha, whenever you write any date in your answer, you'll be putting this kind of symbol. What is this? Circa. Circa means approx, lagbhag, ठीक है, around. So this, whenever you have been writing any date in obstacle, specifically in the ancient and the medieval types, खासकर ancient में, you'll be putting this mark. Otherwise, this shows your understanding, less understanding of the subject. If you have been writing that the Vedic Mahajanpada period started from the 600 BCE, that conveys this sense. Try to understand my point. कि 601 BCE जैसे ही खत्म हुआ, the moment it ended, next day the Aryans appeared in this India. This is the sense which is carrying, right? So you don't try to understand the significance of this, and that's why I'm telling you, though even sometimes I am also not writing it, but in your answer you'll be definitely mentioning it. This is the Mahajanpada period. It is one of the most remarkable period in Indian history. Why it's very remarkable period in Indian history? Because it marked several changes. The Mahajanpada period is considered to be the second urbanization. It's also known for the state formation, and it's also known for the development of the religious sects or the cults such as Buddhism, Jainism and so on, right? So Mahajanpada period is again very important for your syllabus because it is known for some of the great transformations in terms of state formation, in terms of, let's say, second urbanization, in terms of the religious revolution. So that's how it remains very, very important chapter for you. Always keep in mind. So they the chapters which are important, अच्छा हम बाद में बात करेंगे इस पे कौन-कौन से important. So this is the Mahajanpada period. Now what happened after the Mahajanpada period? After the Mahajanpada period, we reach to Mauryan period, and the history of the Mauryan is from, let's say, 3rd century. In fact, it started from the 4th century. 324 Chandragupta Maurya became the ruler ना, तो 324 BC में बन जाता. तो ठीक है, हम roughly इसको 3rd century लेते हैं. From the 3rd century to 2nd century BC. This is the period for the Mauryans. The Mauryans are considered to be the first empire in Indian context. Whether it was the first empire in Indian context. Empire का वो हम किसी को नहीं कहते हैं, because Mauryans had been ruling, Nandas were ruling only on this northern India, ठीक है. लेकिन मौर्यंस जो है वो कहाँ रूल कर रहे हैं? पूरे इंडिया में रूल कर रहे हैं, एक्सेप्ट एक्सट्रीम साउथ, ठीक है. दैट्स कॉल्ड एज, व्हाइल राइटिंग योर आंसर यू कैन ऑल्सो यूज द टर्म तमिलकम, ठीक है. So the moment you say Tamilkam, that includes Tamil Nadu and Kerala. The moment you say Deccan, that includes Andhra and Karnataka. ठीक है. तो आप ये चीज़ें बहुत अच्छे से दिमाग में बिठा लीजिए. So the moment I say Deccan, मतलब I'm talking about or I'm referring Andhra and Karnataka. When I'm saying Tamilkam or let's say extreme south, I'm referring the like two states, Kerala and Tamil Nadu. ठीक है. So the Mauryans are considered to be, it is the like first empire, and that sounds very important period, but let me tell you the importance of the Mauryan for your syllabus is bit less, or it's lesser than the other topics that you always keep in mind. ठीक है. यहाँ लिखता है अशोक है, ये है, वो है, but then practically it is less important. And then after the Mauryans, we reach to one period that's called as, or the next period, which is known as the post-Mauryan period. It is sometimes also called as the dark age of Indian history, right? It is also called as dark age of Indian history, and the period can be kept from the 2nd century BC, from the 2nd century BCE to 3rd century CE. नहीं, BCE मतलब जो है आपने पूरा 100 साल का पीरियड रेफर कर दिया, आपने ये फिक्स नहीं किया इस 100 साल में कहाँ. तो जब आप वैसे लिखते हैं तब मत लिखिए, ठीक है. जब आप लिखते हैं 600, 500, 300, then you'll be writing this. Clear? ये बात समझ में आ गई ना? When you are writing in terms of century, you don't need to put the C. When you are writing 600, 500 or let's say whatever it is, if it is a concrete number, in that case you'll be writing it. This is the post-Mauryan period. Post-Mauryan period is known for multiple developments in India, ठीक है. In fact, here the history can be divided into many parts. The post-Mauryan period can be divided into North India, ठीक है, then North, West India, then Deccan, and then the extreme south or the Tamilkam region. Now this is the most important period for you. Why it is most important period? Is in north you find certain dynasties such as Sunga and Kanva. In northwest you find certain dynasties such as Indo-Greeks, Sakas, Parthians, Kusanas, the Saka Chhatrapas, and so on. ठीक है? So that you find in the northwestern India. Then in Deccan you find Satavahanas, and in extreme south you find the Cholas, Cheras, and Pandyas. So have you noticed one thing? This is the, like again I must say that this is the first period which is studied in Indian history. This is the first period which is studied with respect to first period which is studied with respect to Indian history. So the history of South India had started from which period? From the Sangam age only. This is again one of the lacunas of Indian history. ठीक है? Why this lacuna is there? Why this lacuna is there? ये एक ही आंसर पकड़ लिया, उसी को बार बार दे रहे हैं. Exactly. That problem was there with the Indian historians, that they had been always chasing the Aryans. और कौन ये सबसे ज़्यादा चेस कर रहे होंगे? कौन से? Britishers. Not say Britishers. Say yes, imperial or the colonial school. Since they wanted to prove that every sort of development that has taken place in India was because of Aryans. Immediately before this period, ठीक है, even we have signs that the Aryans even migrated to South India, and that's how they got focused towards it, ठीक है, and they wrote the history of South India. But then it was proved wrong, and then we have started studying even this period also, and that again a new history of South, like that is like first this was created, and then we started history of South India with respect to certain new topics such as mound sites. This is one age, and the next one is megalithic. This is given in your syllabus specifically. Not really, मतलब जोड़ लो ना यार 1500, तो मतलब वैदिक टाइम के वो हो गया, और मेगालिथिक 3rd century BC तक जाता है, तो मतलब इट इज मोर लेस कंटिन्यू टिल द मॉडर्न पीरियड. संगम के शुरू होने से पहले ये दो कल्चरल फेजेस हमें दिखते हैं. which is known as Mount. There are two cultural phases that could be noticed before the Sangam age, which is known as Mount sites, and then मेगालिथिक एंड देन संगम एज. ठीक है, लेकिन प्रॉब्लम क्या है? फर्स्ट वी स्टडीड दिस, लेटर ऑन इन ऑर्डर टू रिजेक्ट दैट थियोरी that every development that has taken place in South India is not because of the Aryans, it is also because of their own developments. We have come back and we have just tried to study about them. And recently I must tell you, अभी एक नया theory आया है, बहुत recent है, and that theory says कि even the Sangam age or the evidence of certain urbanization could be noticed in this part, which is even not in this part, sorry, even in this particular period. मतलब before IBC, some signs of urbanization are there in the Sangam region. And if this theory has been proved, whole concept of our understanding of Indian history would be drastically changed. Why? Because we say that IBC is the first urbanized phase, and if it is really proved, in that case we'll be able to prove Sangam age, or let's say that means कि the Dravidian people were very much advanced than the North Indian people. So बहुत theories बदल सकते. Exactly, yes, सही कह रहे हैं आप. तो चीज़ें बदल रही हिस्ट्री में, एक ही हिस्ट्री नहीं है. ये कुछ लोग मार्केट में कहते हैं कि हिस्ट्री स्टैग्नेंट पेपर है, इसमें कुछ नहीं बदलता है. तो कुछ नहीं बदलेगा, सच में उसकी किस्मत भी नहीं बदलेगी जो लोग ऐसे समझेंगे कि हिस्ट्री में कुछ नहीं बदलता. देयर आर चेंजेस, एंड इन फैक्ट आई मस्ट टेल यू, द इन्फॉर्मेशन व्हाट आई एम गिविंग यू, this kind of information can be used in your answer writing. They are not the core content of history, but they can be really included in the answers, and I'll tell you that how they will be included, or they could be included in the answer. Okay, is there some clarity about this South India? What are the things which are happening in South India and how did it happen? ये connections याद रहेंगे ना, ये सब मैं क्यों बता रहा हूँ? The reason because of what I've been telling you all this information, or I'm giving you all this information, is very simply this, that if you really know these things, you'll be able to comprehend the questions. Sometimes the questions are being asked in this way only. ठीक है? So this information only can help you to comprehend the question in a better way, and that's why don't ignore these kind of things. Some people are feeling sleepy, I guess. ठीक है? नींद आ रही है? किसको किसको? नहीं. कहानी सुनाता हूँ मैं नींद आने पे. जब नींद आए तो बताइए, कहानी सुनाऊंगा. मेगालिथिक से आता है यार. हाँ, मेगालिथिक से आ रहा है ना. हर तीसरे साल में एक क्वेश्चन पूछ रहे हैं लोग मेगालिथिक से. तीसरे साल में. लेकिन वो माया है, वो सब चालकोलिथिक माया है, छोड़ दीजिए. Now there is no existence of Chalcolithic. Have you seen any chapter? How many of you have seen the book of Upinder Singh, or let's say Ranveer Chakravarti? देखा है? Is there any specific chapter with the name of Chalcolithic?
It is considered contemporary of the Vedic age.
Not really. You just check out the book, you'll find that the Chalcolithic has been included with Neolithic people. ठीक है? Now the chapter says the Neolithic Chalcolithic communities. Check out the chapter. The reason, कोई बता सकता है क्या reason है? Same
kind of development.
as in
agriculture, like Jorve culture.
हाँ, एकदम हम इसको अलग क्यों नहीं रख रहे? नए कंसेप्ट में now there is no separate existence of Chalcolithic. We always include them in Neolithic. कोई थोड़ा क्रिएटिव आइडिया किसी के पास हो? नहीं. बहुत सिंपल सी बात है. आई थिंक यू ऑल नो दैट मेटल डज प्ले वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल in identifying the societies. Yes or no? Why the metal does play so important role in identifying the societies? Is it all about agriculture? No. The metal changes the life ways, right? If you have been using a metal like copper, and if you have been using a metal like iron, like, is there any difference between these two or not? Can you use the copper in the same way the way you can use the iron? No, no. Iron is a hard stuff, ठीक है, hard metal. Copper is not, right? So with the help of copper, you won't be able to create tools, and with the help of iron, you'll be able to create a tool. आप हैमर बनाएंगे अगर कॉपर का, तो जैसे ही आप करेंगे वो कॉपर ही पिचक जाएगा, क्योंकि इतना मजबूत नहीं हो रहा. तो you just tell me that do you really think that after the Neolithic, when they discovered copper, like do you really think that copper had this much potential to change their life ways altogether? नहीं, it was changed only after the discovery of bronze. ठीक है, bronze was a hard stuff. Bronze is a hard stuff. तो ब्रॉन्ज का आप टूल बना सकते हैं, लेकिन आप कॉपर का नहीं बना सकते हैं. That's the reason we have been studying IVC separately and we have been emphasizing this much. बट हम चाल्कोलिथिक में क्या फ़र्क पड़ जाएगा, नियोलिथिक से चाल्कोलिथिक, लाइक द मैक्सिमम यूज दैट यू कुड हैव डन ऑफ कॉपर व्हाट यू नो, यू कुड हैव मेक सर्टन यूटेंसिल्स ऑफ द कॉपर, बर्तन बना के खा सकते थे. दिस इज द मैक्सिमम यूटिलिटी ऑफ कॉपर. सो डू यू रियली थिंक दैट द नियोलिथिक लाइफ वुड हैव बीन चेंज ऑल टुगेदर आफ्टर द डिस्कवरी ऑफ कॉपर? नहीं ना. तो इसीलिए हमने नियोलिथिक चाल्कोलिथिक को क्या कर दिया है, एक साथ रख दिया है, क्योंकि नियोलिथिक के बाद चाल्कोलिथिक आता है. तो चाल्कोलिथिक कम्स इमीडिएटली आफ्टर द नियोलिथिक, but then it does not bring a kind of greater change in the society. That's it. Understood the point? Okay, fine. So questions आता है यार इधर से. Chalcolithic अब separate वो खत्म हो गई. There are certain cultures and in fact the study of the Chalcolithic is not completed yet in India. Reason, the moment I say Chalcolithic, you always talk about this Jorwe, Nevasa, Daimabad, ये आहार गिलुन कल्चर, यही सारे कुछ कल्चर्स है जिसके बारे में आप बात करते हैं. These are the cultures what you talk about. But then it is incorrect that the Chalcolithic culture was noticed only in the western part of India. The Chalcolithic culture is very much noticed in the North India. It is very much noticed in the eastern part of India. But then so far we haven't studied them properly. And the reason is very simple, because the discovery of copper is not something which is changing their life ways drastically. And this is the reason because of what we are not paying greater attention to this Chalcolithic culture. So the only part which is studied, like which has been studied good by the archaeologists, that's the Chalcolithic cultures. There's 4-5 cultures which is there in the western side of India. We will just prepare that, like one question. Either the question is coming from megalithic or Chalcolithic, and that's how they go. Like they are being asked in a circle basically. So we are definitely going to prepare something, right? So when the development in North India goes in this particular direction, the development in South India goes in this particular direction, that you need to keep in mind. So this period is known as the post-modern period. So when there are so many dynasties and there are so many developments, so you see the Sungas, then the Kanvas in the northwest, you see the like Indo-Greeks, then the Sakas, then the Parthians, then Kusanas, then Saka Chhatrapas, and so on, right? So there, and then in the Deccan you find the Satavahanas, in South India you find the Chola Cheras and Pandyas. So now you guys tell me which one is more important for you, the Mauryan period or the post-modern period? Why post-modern period? Whereas the political change is there, isn't that true? Mauryans are known for their centralization, ठीक है? The Mauryans are known for their centralization, but the post-modern period is known for decentralization. And the moment there is a decentralization, I must tell you that there might be changes in multiple other manners also, ठीक है? In other areas, not manners, in other areas also, such as political changes are there, decentralization. Like that secures economic changes, social changes are there, cultural changes are there. और जब भी किसी पीरियड में बहुत सारे चेंजेस होते हैं तो वो आपके लिए बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट है. जिस पीरियड में मोनोटोनी रहती है, इन एनी पीरियड वेयर द मोनोटोनी इज देयर, दैट इज नॉट वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर यू. सो द मौर्यन पीरियड is not very important. Why? That monotony is there. In Mauryan period, there are only few questions which are being asked, and I can tell you right away that what are the questions being asked. One is about Arthashastra. ठीक है. The second is about the centralized nature of the Mauryan state, and the third is about Asoka and his Dhamma. That's it. Finish. Mauryan खत्म हो गया. एक जो नहीं पूछा अभी तक, आगे पूछेंगे कभी. The reasons behind the Mauryan decline. These are the 4 questions. ठीक है, that could be asked from the Mauryan. But the moment it comes to post-Mauryan period, you just check out your questions. ठीक है, check out your, अच्छा, I haven't given you that paper yet, na? The question analysis वाला paper. Okay, fine. Maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow we'll get the paper. In that particular paper, we do have the compilation of the questions till 2022 as per the topic. और topic को भी further divide किया हुआ है हमने कि IVC है तो उसके origin से कितने साल questions आए हैं. In a chronology, I have given it. So that can help you to understand what are the dimensions from where the questions are being asked. So I do not know that whether the prints are there or not, there or not. So by tomorrow, day after tomorrow, I'll get it to you. Okay? So okay, so this period is important because here you find the political change, economic change, social change, cultural change, बहुत सारे changes हैं. मॉडर्न में कुछ change ही नहीं है ऐसा, तो change नहीं है तो हमारे लिए important नहीं है. तो दिखने में मॉडर्न बहुत important लगते हैं, बट हमारे यूपीएससी के सिलेबस के हिसाब से बहुत important नहीं है. पोस्ट मॉडर्न जो आप शायद दिखने में इतने important नहीं लगते हैं, और रीज़न है, there is a reason because of what it is not very important for us, because for a very long period of time the post modern period was considered as the dark age of Indian history, and any period which had the signs of decentralization is always considered to be dark age. तो डार्क एज तो मतलब किल्विस वाला एज हो गया. किल्विस को जानते हैं ना, अंधेरा कायम रहे जो हमेशा बोलता रहता था, हाँ, शक्तिमान वाला, राइट. तो वो पीरियड जो है एक बहुत लंबे टाइम तक हिस्टोरियंस इग्नोर कर देते थे, पढ़ते ही नहीं थे, उसको पढ़ाते भी नहीं थे. पर अभी क्या है, वही पीरियड्स हैं जिसमें सबसे ज़्यादा चेंजेस हुए हैं. और आई जस्ट टोल्ड यू दैट हिस्ट्री इज ऑल अबाउट द कंटिन्यूटी एंड चेंजेस. So this is the reason this period has become very important for us. Okay, so that's post-modern period, and I must tell you that this is the most important period for you. So for you, I must say the IBC is very important. Every year one question is being asked. Mahajanpada is very important for you. So this is topic number 1, this is topic number 2, and this is topic number 3, which is important for you, which is very important for you. 3, and then after the post-modern, what happened? Just check out how many questions have been asked from Gupta, right? From the 3rd century to 6th century BC, 6th century CE. That's the period of the Gupta. Check out. You won't find good number of questions are being asked from Gupta period. Okay? Why? Because politically they haven't done anything as such very sound. Like it is definitely the let's say last empire, because it had been controlling the whole North India. This is true. And their political history is something where the historians are not interested at all. There are certain institutions in polity because of what it is there, but then this period is known for its cultural achievements, right? Cultural achievements and some other things. ठीक है? You remember just now I gave one statement for Bengal, that in which particular period Bengal was settled? Post नहीं, Gupta period. ठीक है? Precisely speaking, Gupta period. Post modern से शुरू हो गया था. And because of the settlement of human settlements in the Bengal region that happened in the Gupta period, that has actually started some more cultural changes in terms of Brahmadeyas. I think you all must have heard of it. कोई नई ज़मीन बसानी है तो उसका सबसे बेहतर तरीका क्या होता है? If you really want to settle a new land, what is the best way of doing it? You donate this land to a Brahmin. That Brahmin is not only carrying that Brahminical culture, but it is also carrying the new information on what? New information on agriculture and other things. Understood the point? Who all were living in this Bengal region? Tribals. Now they were not having that expertise in agriculture. Then this land was donated to a person, a Brahmin. इसको donate कर दिया, ठीक है? And this fellow is यार donate सच में थोड़ी ना किया, इतना खुश हो रहे हैं यार. मैं राजा थोड़ी हूँ यार, ठीक है? मैं राजा भी नहीं हूँ, आपको donate भी नहीं मिला वो तो. अच्छा, ठीक है. तो मैंने मान लीजिए इसको donate कर दिया, मैं राजा हूँ, ठीक है? And that this person is not only carrying this Brahminical culture, along with this, he is carrying the ideas of agriculture which is being followed in the mainstream societies. ठीक है? तो उससे क्या होता है? एग्रीकल्चरल डेवलपमेंट होता है. तो दिस इज हाउ द डेवलपमेंट्स विच आर हैपनिंग इन दिस पर्टिकुलर पीरियड वाज वेरी मच रिलेटेड टू द अदर चेंजेस. सो हियर यू कैन फाइंड वन थिंग, द कल्चरल एंड द सेकेंड इज द सोशल चेंजेस are very important, right? Cultural and the social changes are very important, and that's the reason because of what you can find most of the questions were asked from these two regions, these two domains. इससे ज़्यादा question पूछते हैं. तो that's the significance of this period. After this Gupta period, ठीक है, again there is a gap. Where? Here. ठीक है, again there is a gap here. We do not study of period, this period in South India. Most probably we believe that this has continued here. And then after that, the period of Harsa is there. ठीक है, Harsa in which century? 7th century, the first half of 7th century, and that's considered to be the end of which period? End of ancient India. this is considered to be the end of ancient India. And why it is considered to be the end of ancient India? Because it is believed that Harsha was the last emperor in this country. After that, we have never seen such kind of consolidated, powerful and bigger empire ever till the coming of दिल्ली सल्तनत, ठीक है। हर्षा एक ऐसे अपने जब चरम पे था, at that point of time Harsha was ruling from the Deccan to Kashmir and from the west to Bengal. That was the extent of Harsha's empire. हाँ, पुलकेशिन सेकंड में, ठीक है। हरा यार, राजा है, हार जाता है, कौन सी बड़ी बात है इसमें, ठीक है। राजा ही हारेगा यार, है ना। बाद में बात करेंगे उसके बारे में, है वो ठीक है, हरा, लेकिन वो हर्षा का फिर डाउनफॉल शुरू हो गया उसके बाद। फिर हर्षा के बारे में यार देखो, ज़्यादातर जानकारी हमारे पास ना सिर्फ उसके फर्स्ट ईयर को लेके है, ठीक है। क्योंकि बाणभट्ट जो है जब हर्षचरित लिखते हैं, व्हेन ही इज राइटिंग हर्षचरित, ही इज जस्ट राइटिंग अबाउट द फर्स्ट ईयर ऑफ हर्षा, एंड हर्षा वॉज प्रेजेंटेड एज ए रियल हीरो बाय हर्षचरित, बाय बाणभट्ट, ठीक है। वो सब बातें बाद में करें। हर्षा इज कंसिडर्ड टू बी द लास्ट थिंग, लास्ट रूलर। व्हाई? बिकॉज आफ्टर हर्षा वी डू नॉट सी any empire as such, ठीक है। and then you see the smaller dynasties are coming, and this is considered to be what? That is considered to be the early medieval period, ठीक है। it is considered to be early medieval. अभी though I am not convinced with this idea of calling it early medieval. Why I am not convinced? इतना बड़ा हिस्टोरियन तो मैं हूँ नहीं कि मैं मेरे फ़र्क पड़ता है कि मैं कन्विंस हूँ या नहीं। फ़र्क इससे पड़ता है, you just pick up any book of ancient India written before 2000, ठीक है, and pick up any book of ancient India which is written after 2000. There is a massive difference. You'll be, will be able to notice that the books written before 2000 they never included early medieval in ancient India, right? आर एस शर्मा की किताब में आपको अर्ली मेडिवल नहीं मिलेगा, कोई भी किताब उठा लीजिए आपको अर्ली मेडिवल नहीं मिलेगा, ठीक है। और अभी उपिंदर सिंह की किताब कहाँ पे खत्म हो रही है? विच इज़ द पीरियड? 12th सेंचुरी। क्यों खत्म हो रही है 12th सेंचुरी? रणवीर चक्रवर्ती की किताब जो नई एडिशन आई कहाँ खत्म हो रही है? 12th सेंचुरी पे। क्यों? क्योंकि हमारा परसेप्शन बदल गया। नाउ वी हैव गॉट ए डिफरेंट परसेप्शन एंड वी हैव स्टार्टेड कीपिंग इवन दिस पीरियड एज पार्ट ऑफ एंशिएंट, राइट? वाई इट इज़ देयर दैट आई विल डिस्कस ओनली वंस वी रीच टू दैट टॉपिक, ठीक है। तो ये सब परसेप्शन क्यों बदले ये सब हम बात करें। दिस इज एंशिएंट इंडिया। साउथ में मोस्ट प्रोबेबली दे कंटिन्यूड ड्यूरिंग दिस पीरियड, द मेजर चेंजेस आर देयर अर्ली मेडिवल में, ठीक है। अभी हम नहीं बात करेंगे उसके, अर्ली मेडिवल को हम अलग रखते हैं। अभी टाइमलाइन क्लियर है, क्रोनोलॉजी इज क्लियर टू यू, एनी डाउट? नहीं, ग्रेट, ठीक है।
जो आपने बताया था एसमाउंट साइट्स आपने बताई थी, कल्चरल फेज है।
कौन सा?
एसमाउंट साइट्स
कल्चरल फेज है। एसमाउंट साइट इज नियोलिथिक ओनली, ठीक है। एंड दिस इज ए न्यू कल्चरल साइट दैट कुड बी नोटिस, दो इट्स नॉट न्यू यार। कहते हैं कि मेगालिथिक इज द मोस्ट स्प्रेड cultural phase in the world. Like megalithic cannot be noticed only in South India, it is there noticed in Africa, in Europe, and in fact in different parts of India. But then when we talk about this megalithic, this is a very different culture. So it is not just about using some bigger pieces of stone, it's a culture which can be precisely noticed in South India. It's also a cultural phase. ठीक है? And why is the megalithic very important? ये मैं तब बताऊंगा when I'll come to the history of South India. ठीक है? Clear है? Okay. So now the first topic, that's sources. Every year, at least one question is being asked from sources, right? This too you must have noticed. How many of you have seen the previous year questions? Honest? एक, दो, तीन. हाँ? अच्छे से नहीं देखा. Sorry? मॉडर्न का देखा है, ओके। अच्छा, हाउ मेनी ऑफ यू रिमेंबर द क्वेश्चंस दैट हैव बीन आस्क्ड इन प्रीवियस ईयर्स अलॉन्ग विद द ईयर? मतलब नॉट एग्जैक्टली कि 2017 और 18, रफली इधर इट वाज आस्क्ड इन 3-4 years बैक और देयर वाज सच क्वेश्चन. कितने लोग हैं ऐसे? आई विल बी प्रोवाइडिंग यू दैट डॉक्यूमेंट ईदर टुमारो और डे आफ्टर टुमारो, ठीक है। एंड I can circulate the PDF also for that. So you will keep on seeing the questions of previous years, which is there as per the topic. So that is something which is very much important, right? So you all won't skip it, rather will develop this habit, because it's not going to happen in one day you start remembering all the questions. If you'll keep on seeing the questions, in that case over the period you'll start having the idea that what kind of questions are being framed by UPSC, right? Sources is one topic from where every year at least one question, and in certain years more than one questions have been asked. The moment it comes to the sources, what is the significance of this particular topic? There are two different kind of questions can be asked. Listen it very carefully. What are these two aspects from where the question can be asked? There is one, the general questions, right? And the second, some specific questions. What's the difference between the general and the specific question? The general question may be on archaeological sources, maybe on numismatics, numismatics, maybe on foreign accounts and so on, right? So this kind of question may be asked. What is the specific question? When there are certain sources, on the certain sources, the question has been asked, such as Arthashastra, such as Indica, such as Kalhana's Raj Tarangani, and so on. So basically there's two different kind of questions are being asked from the sources, right? So in the first go, what we are going to what we are going to do, we are not going to cover this one, because this will cover as per the period. So when we'll reach to the Mauryan period, of course we'll cover Arthashastra, Indica. When we'll reach to early medieval, we'll cover Indica. When we'll reach to the Harsha's period, we'll cover Harsha Charita. So this is how we are going to cover the specific sources with the dynasties, right, or with the period. But then here what we are going to do, we are going to have a general overview of the sources, and of course there are certain questions being asked from this dimension also, and that's why we'll try to have not just an overview, rather all sort of understanding which is possible for us to understand this period. Okay. Now when it comes to the Indian history, this one thing I had been repeating in my past lectures also continuously. Now we have to understand that Indian history started from the 18th century, more specifically in a true sense the Indian history 19th century, and this Indian history was always mostly based on literary sources. This is one of the biggest lacuna of Indian history, and I have told you that there are many reasons because of what, while writing the Indian history we have followed more the literary sources. While doing research on ancient India, since you have to write something, you all can understand it is easier for you to consult what, the literary sources. Why did it happen in the initial period? Because I told you the role played by Asiatic societies. What the Asiatic society is this? Asiatic societies were mainly into the translation works, and I told you that what kind of books have been translated. So that included such as Manusmriti, Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, Mahabharat, Quran, and so on. So when all these books were translated, and then certain Smritis and all as well. So all these books were translated. So somehow the European scholars, specifically I'll say the imperialist scholars, got a proper stuff to write something on Indian history, and that's how they started writing the Indian history. Whether it is real history or not, that may be a subject to the debate. Maybe on some other time we'll have a discussion over this also, that whether it is closer to the history what we follow in the present time or not. But the kind of history which is undoubtedly a modern history was written by them, and which had followed largely what? It had followed largely the literary sources. Unfortunately, the archaeological sources were not consulted a lot, and that's how, please understand this point, that Indian history was majorly based on the literary sources, right? And then once the Archaeological Survey of India got established, so what was the period when the Archaeological Survey of India got established for the first time in India? Kab? 1870s, I must say. 1870s, it was functional, but it was functional only for a couple of years, and then it got shut down. And then again after that, like after let's say 10 years, it got shut down, and then again around 1904 this was established and then started working. Now you guys tell me which history would be best one, a history which is based on this sources, a history which is based on these sources, or a history which is based on both. कौन सा बेहतर है? Both वाला बेहतर है, ठीक है? And with the moment I say both, there is a word that you have to keep in mind, that's called as juxtapose or the juxtaposition, ठीक है? You understand the meaning of this term juxtaposition? Juxtaposition मतलब when you go for a comparative study of different sources, then only you write history. You remember one question has been asked in UPSC, that the archaeological sources and the literary sources present two different pictures of Indian history. Remember, देखा ही नहीं है. There are many questions. There are many such questions which are being asked. And this question, what I am trying to discuss, exactly the same thing, that the archaeological sources and the literary sources present two different pictures of Indian history. And you are completely blank. Most of the students, those who had been writing, कि ये क्या पूछ ले यार, ये कौन सी चिड़िया है, ऐसा तो कभी पढ़ा ही नहीं हमने. इसी वजह से don't read in a traditional way, ठीक है? कैसे ट्रेडिशनल वे कैसा होता है? देयर आर डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ सोर्सेस, आर्कियोलॉजिकल, लिटरेरी. ओके, आर्कियोलॉजी, इन आर्कियोलॉजी व्हाट वी स्टडी, एपिग्राफी, न्यूमिस्मेटिक, राइट? तो हमने पढ़ लिया एपिग्राफी पॉजिटिव नेगेटिव, ठीक है, न्यूमिस्मेटिक पॉजिटिव नेगेटिव, बट ये तो पढ़ा ही नहीं. तो लेट्स स्टार्ट फ्रॉम देयर ओनली कि व्हाई दिस डबल, लाइक आई फर्स्ट यू अंडरस्टूड कि why the sources in India, like sources for the history were not referred properly, because of course India was a colony, and in a colony or in a colonized region, of course the government would not be investing much into these kind of things, archaeological researches and all. So that's how initial history of India was precisely based on the literary sources. And then, like I must say, after that, when it got established, specifically after 1904, we can find that certain archaeological excavations were being done, and in fact the incorporation of these things also had started in the history of India. So of course it started presenting a better picture. And let me tell you how, like that makes the difference, that creates the difference, that if you have been using both the sort of sources. When it comes to the postmodern period, right? When it comes to the postmodern period, there is a broader idea for this period. And what exactly was this? That the postmodern period is known for Brahmanical revivalism. Clear? क्यों कहा ऐसा कि this period is the period for the Brahmanical revivalism? ब्रह्मदया अभी नहीं शुरू हुए. ब्रह्मदया मैंने अभी बताया कि गुप्ता पीरियड के बाद से शुरू होते हैं, ठीक है? शुरू हुआ है, but that's very minimal, ठीक है? It's not a popular institution at that point of time. Why are we claiming that it was a period for the Brahmanical revivalism? संस्कृत क्या? कोर्ट लैंग्वेज, ठीक है, ओके फाइन. कहाँ से पता चला हमें कि संस्कृत वाज द कोर्ट लैंग्वेज? उनके ड्रामास. कौन से ड्रामा लिखे गए इस पीरियड में? फंस गए ये लड़का भी. ड्रामा सबसे पहले किसने लिखा? कालिदास. भास, शूद्रक सब एक ही टाइम के, और उनका पीरियड कौन सा है? 6th सेंचुरी, 5th सेंचुरी, 6th सेंचुरी में. तो आपका आइडिया नहीं चलेगा इधर, ठीक है? तो नहीं है. फिर कहाँ से पता चला? क्यों हम क्लेम करते हैं कि दिस पीरियड इज अ पीरियड फॉर ब्राह्मणिकल रिवाइवलिज्म? What is the source for claiming this? In ancient India, everything that you write, that should be supported by source. ठीक है, आप बताइए. इल्ले क्या रेफर किया हमने? We referred the Sanskrit sources, ठीक है? And among these Sanskrit sources, such as Patanjali's Mahabhasya, Arthashastra, these are what kind of texts? They are Sanskrit texts. And in these texts, what information we started getting, let me tell you. Like in these texts, we started finding the information like Pushyamitra Shunga, then the Satvana rulers. They are performing what kind of rituals? The Vedic rituals, or let's say the Vedic rituals such as Ashumik, Bajpayee, Rajasuya. Then the information, right, that all these dynasties used to call themselves as Brahmachhatra. From where exactly we find this information? Again, the Sanskrit texts which were written. There are very minimal, there are very less number of texts which are there in this period, but they were written in this period, and these are always giving us information that there is, kind of great following of what? Brahmanism. Okay? And we got or we found certain evidences which are clearly proving that there is a revival of Brahmanism. That's one picture of the post-modern period. Fair enough. Okay. So we came up with one picture. We came up with one picture of Brahmanical revivalism. Then it comes to the next picture. Okay. Then what happened? The archaeological sources were excavated. Okay. And the moment we excavated the archaeological sources, and then we realized one thing, that majority of the development in the Buddhist architecture have taken place in which period? Post-Mauryan period. Every stupa, like what you see presently, were developed in the post-Mauryan period of time. I am not saying that the Mauryans were not making the stupas, chaityas and viharas, but unfortunately their architecture was not that much developed, and that's why they never had the potential to survive for such a longer period of time. But the moment it comes to the post-Mauryan period, the architecture got slightly developed, and then we see that stones are being used for the making architecture. And every architecture, either you talk about the Sanchi stupa, the Bharut stupa, or the Sarnath stupa, or else you have been talking about the chaityas and chaityas of Ajanta, Karle, Bhaja. All these structures were built or let's say rebuilt during which period? Post-Mauryan period. आपको पता है, most of the stupas were either reconstructed or elaborated by Pushyamitra Shunga. You all must be knowing that Amaravati School of Art and then Amaravati, Nagarjun Koda, Jagyapeta and the stupas over these places ultimately were built by whom? Satvana rulers. And Satvanas were also considered to be part of this Brahmanical revivalism. Now, don't you think there is a contradictory picture over here? At one hand, we had been talking about the Brahmanical revivalism. On the other hand, what exactly we have been talking? The proper patronization of Buddhism. So this is how I you can compare or you can write that there are sometimes two contradictory pictures which are presented by the archaeological sources and the literary sources, and that's the reason because of what is the best way of writing history when we have been merging all these let's say together, and then we try to frame any idea or let's say any conclusion. So that would be the best way of writing history. Got the point? So always remember this word. And whenever you have been writing any answer on the sources, in the conclusion, this word has to be there. कोई भी source पे आप आंसर लिख रहे हैं. Either you are writing on archaeological sources, numismatic, epigraphy, literary sources. In the conclusion, the word should be there. What? Juxtaposition. ठीक है? That if we juxtapose different kind of sources available for that period, in that case, we can find a better picture of the period, right? Okay. So now, let's see the categories of the sources. Okay. Roughly, we did discuss about that, but still, let's talk about the categories. Okay. So normally, the sources are divided into two categories. ये सब बहुत लोगों को आता होगा, ठीक है? और ठीक है. My work is to complete it. One which is known as literary sources, and the second which is known as archaeological sources. Now, literary sources can be further divided into two parts. One which is religious, and the second which is known as secular sources. Okay. One more category we can find for it here, the foreign accounts. So these are three different kind of literary sources. Now it is easier for us to classify them into category like religious and secular. But let me tell you, it is not that easy. Okay? There is no book which is dealing with either completely with the secular world or the material world, or there is no such book which is dealing with only the religious world. Let's say Vedas, what kind of book it is? Books they are. Religious book. But then how do you write the history of Vedic period? And there you write about the polity, economy, everything. How do you write about them? So of course you draw the information or you extract the information on of the material world or the secular world from the Vedas itself. So how, in that case, how come you can claim that Vedas are religious text? Or let's say, what is the secular text? Arthashastra? That can be an ideal example of the secular text. But do you really think that in Arthashastra there is no discussion over the religion? No, it is incorrect. There is good discussion over the religion also. And in fact, I told you that what is the purpose. So, sorry, I didn't tell you. What is the purpose of writing the Arthashastra? There is a purpose, and the purpose was religious itself because of what Arthashastra was written. What are the 4 goals defined of the human being in the religious text? Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha, right? So, as far as Dharma and Moksha are concerned, so that could be covered through the religious text. But then when it comes to 2 other goals, these are Artha and Kama. Arthashastra and Kama Sutra. तो वो भी तो रिलीजियस गोल है ना जिसके लिए किताबें लिखी गई थी. तो हाउ कैन यू क्लासीफाई देम कंप्लीटली इन द सेक्युलर टेक्स्ट? सो इट्स नॉट दैट इजी. फॉर आवर कन्वीनियंस वी हैव बीन क्लासीफाइंग देम इनटू द कैटेगरीज ऑफ लाइक रिलीजियस एंड सेक्युलर. बट ठीक है, हम अपना पॉपुलर जो नोशंस है उसको फॉलो करेंगे. देन द मोमेंट इट कम्स टू द रिलीजियस टेक्स्ट, देयर आल्सो वी कैन फाइंड लाइक डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ सोर्सेस. सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल वी कैन कीप ब्राह्मणिकल सोर्सेस, देन वी कैन कीप बुद्धिस्ट सोर्सेस, and then we can keep the Jain sources. And out of these 2, I must tell you that Brahminical and the Buddhist sources are considered to be the most important sources for us. Reason? Because our majority of the understanding on ancient India is precisely based upon the Brahminical and the Buddhist texts. I'll be going for a comparative study between these 2 also, but that will come over the period. Maybe in tomorrow's class we'll be covering it. Okay? So basically these are the 3 texts. Jain texts are not that much important for us. Why? Because the compilation of the Jain text took place pretty late, somewhere in 5th century CE. So you see Jainism in the 6th century BC, and then the compilation of the Jaina text in which period? 5th century CE. So there is a difference of 1100 years. So there's a huge difference of time, and that's why the Jaina texts are not referred a lot for writing the history, because there, by that time there is great manipulation. But these 2, like here we have, like sometimes when it comes to the Vedic period, we have no choice except depending on the Brahminical sources. When it comes to the Mahajanpada period precisely, or Mahajanpada period and onwards, definitely we are having another kind of source, and then the comparative study again between the Brahminical and the Buddhist sources can get you a better picture of the. ये question नहीं पूछा, आने वाले time पे पूछेंगे, मैं बता रहा हूँ आपको, ठीक है? This question has not been asked so far, but in the coming time, like in coming future, they are definitely going to ask this question. The way I just now told you, I referred one question which is comparing the archaeological sources with the literary sources. Now this comparison is also going to come very soon, right? So these are certain religious sources. The moment it comes to the secular sources, right? So there is, like, though there is no fixed criteria or fixed classification of the, like these kind of sources, there might be many such, let's say, classifications, but like overall we can say there are certain books which are written on economy, okay, such as Arthashastra, and then we can talk about another book such as Niti Sara, okay, or let's say Statecraft, okay, Statecraft we can keep again these 2 books like Arthashastra and Niti Sara. Then let's say some on materialism such as Kama Sutra and all. So this kind of books are there. But apart from this, the most important categories which are there in the secular sources is the biography. Okay? Apart from some various subjects, like one important category, okay, on some various subject such as statecraft. Then we can say statecraft, then economy, right? These are some broader topics on what you find. But apart from this, the biographies are the best available secular sources to us. Biographies as in Harsacharit, ठीक है? Kumarpal Charit, right, Daspal Charit. So this is how you can talk about various such books which were written, which are falling in the category of biographies. Okay. Undoubtedly, the biographies sound to be or seem to be seem to be very close to history because it is dealing with the material information, and that's how it is considered to be very important. Along with the biographies, we can talk about another sort of writing that's called as hagiographies. Now, what is this hagiographies? Sage's biography. Okay. Such as I think you must have heard of Buddha Charit, Ashu Ghosh. What kind of like in which category you can keep? Hagiography. ठीक है ना. हेजियोग्राफी मतलब जो सेंट्स की या सेजेस की जो बायोग्राफी होती है उसको हम इस कैटेगरी में रखते हैं, राइट. सो बेसिकली द बायोग्राफीज एंड द हेजियोग्राफीज विच इज देयर लाइक विच कैन बी केप्ट हियर. ठीक है. एंड देन लाइक सर्टन नॉवेल्स, ड्रामाज एंड ऑल. ठीक है. सो वी कैन कीप द नॉवेल्स, dramas. This is another category. So of course certain books we had been referring just now, कालिदास, भास, शूद्रक और इन सारी लोगों को हम रेफर कर रहे थे यहाँ पे, उसको हम किधर रख सकते हैं, उसको हम इधर रख सकते हैं. सो दीज आर रिलीजियस एंड द सेक्युलर सोर्सेस. ठीक है. देन इट कम्स टू द फॉरेन अकाउंट्स. इन द फॉरेन अकाउंट्स वी कैन कीप द लैटिन एंड ग्रीक सोर्सेस एंड Chinese sources, right? So these are two categories that we can see here, Latin and the Greek sources. There we can talk about, there are many scholars that can be Herodotus se lekar jo hai, like we can talk about Herodotus, we can talk about Pliny, then Strabo, then Nearchus, right? Aristobulus. There were many people, those who have been from the Greek world, they have been writing about India. So we are going to study about them. And then Chinese travelers basically, Faiyuan, Wensang, Itzing and so on. So these are certain Chinese travelers which were coming to India. And here like the question may be asked on the separate, let's say Indica is very important, then Faiyuan is very important. ठीक है, तो उनके ऊपर separate questions भी पूछा सकता है. So when it comes to the literary sources, these are the literary sources. When it comes to archaeological sources, like there are again certain categories here. So here we can keep the mounds. Mounds मतलब what we find in the excavations. ठीक है, that's called as mounds. So now what exactly? Basically it's called as artifacts, but why the mounds are being excavated, that's one thing. So normally the mounds are being excavated and there we find some material evidences, but questions are less probable from here. The questions are most probable from epigraphy, which is basically the study of inscriptions, right, and numismatic, that is the study on coins. हमारे पास सबसे इम्पॉर्टेंट ये है. ठीक है. पर आजकल कुछ अलग तरीके से भी क्वेश्चंस आ रहे हैं, जैसे स्कल्पचर्स के ऊपर बेस्ड क्वेश्चन पूछा, या फिर दे हैव बीन आस्किंग द क्वेश्चंस ऑन बेस्ड ऑन आर्किटेक्चर्स. सो बेसिकली स्कल्पचर्स एंड आर्किटेक्चर्स, दीज आर आल्सो बीइंग रेफर्ड समटाइम्स. Like so we will be talking about even the how to use the sculptures and archaeological, because you remember like that question ki no it was not that question, sorry, I am not able to recall, but I'll give you the example of this question also. Once UPSC has asked a question, right now I'm not able to recall that question. So if we'll see the brief overview of the sources, this is the like brief overview of the sources. So ideally speaking, from where we have possibility of the questions, ठीक है. Yes, one possibility of the question, second possibility of the question, ठीक है, it's not going to be asked. When it comes to the secular text, ठीक है, in the secular text, of course, there are a couple of books which are important here, but normally from this particular part, the questions are not being asked. So, but we have to have a kind of better understanding that how come they are helping, because it's not necessary that these questions are being asked directly, but our understanding can be used in writing any answer when we have been writing any answer on sources. So, वहाँ पे हम थोड़ा इसका इस्तेमाल करेंगे. Now, though it is not directly going to be asked, but some ideas should be there. Of course, this is another important part. Directly the questions are being asked from here. So these are three. When it comes to the, like if we'll skip that specific sources, in general These are the 3 dimensions from where the questions can be asked. As I told you, from here there is less possibility of the question. So this is the 4th dimension, this is the 5th dimension, and this is the 6th dimension. And not only these 6 dimensions should be covered separately, but they should be covered together also, and they should be linked with the many other things, such as polity, economy, society, and so on. So we have to have a kind of better understanding. And let me tell you one thing very frankly, that whatever I dictate in the class, it's not necessary that they would be sufficient. So in the class, don't come to only make the notes. Okay? And if you will keep on thinking in this way, you are coming to the class to in order to make the notes, बहुत लोगों का ये मैंने ऑब्जर्व किया है कि वो लिख लेना चाहते हैं यहाँ पे, पढ़ना बाद में चाहते हैं, तो फिर फ़ायदा नहीं मिलेगा उसका. So not only physically but mentally also be present in the class. ठीक है? क्योंकि मैं हर चीज़ नहीं लिखा सकता यार, वो इम्पॉसिबल है. अगर मैं हर चीज़ लिखा देता ना, तो फिर मैं उतनी चीज़ लिखा के बुक ही लिख देता, और उसी की उससे जो है रॉयल्टी खा खा के मैं ठीक ठाक पैसे हो जाते हैं उसके रॉयल्टी से. पॉसिबल नहीं है, बिकॉज द आइडियाज़ कैन बी शेयर्ड, आइडियाज़ कैन बी डिस्कस, but whenever it comes to, and if the ideas are clear, that helps you to decode the question, and then content is there. So I'll be giving the content. So of course this content will be sufficient, but in what way they have been twisting the question, that I do not know. वहाँ पे जो लोग बैठे हैं बनाने के लिए, वो मुझसे भी बड़े और वेटरन लोग बैठे हैं, ठीक है. और आपको पता नहीं कि एकेडमिक वर्ल्ड में लोगों की नॉलेज कितनी खतरनाक लेवल पे होती है, उनकी रीडिंग्स, क्योंकि वो तो स्पेशलाइज्ड लोग हैं. उनको एंशिएंट आता तो सिर्फ एंशिएंट ही आता है, उनको मेडिवल में कुछ बोलेंगे तो ऐसे वो इधर उधर देखने लगेंगे, ठीक है. अब हमारे साथ मजबूरी है कि हमको सब जानना पड़ता है. उनकी नॉलेज लेवल बहुत खतरनाक होती है, हम उनसे कंपेयर भी नहीं कर सकते, हम थोड़ा कोशिश कर सकते हैं उनके पास जाने की. तो इसीलिए समझ पे फोकस करिए, खासकर पेपर 1 में. आई एम वेरी categorically I'm telling you that like in paper 1 not only be present here physically but mentally also, because if you'll understand all these dimensions you'll get the ideas for writing the answers in the question. और जहाँ उन्होंने ट्विस्ट किया आप कोलैप्स कर जाएंगे. इसीलिए ठीक. एनी डाउट, क्वेश्चन, क्वेरी? गो अहेड if it is there. I'll first answer his question. Right. Juxtapose मतलब जैसे suppose you are an archaeologist, ठीक है, और suppose you are an historian, ठीक है. So you had this source to write, ठीक है. मान लो ये source है आपके पास, literary sources है कुछ, ठीक है. So you have been writing your history on that. This is like your history on the basis of this. One possibility, and then there is a other possibility that these are certain archaeological sources you found. So what would be the best way of writing history? That you took some ideas from here, or let's say you just did a kind of comparative analysis of this, ठीक है, and then you try to write a history. Let's say I'll try to understand it in a different way. Let's say this was something which was found in the excavation, ठीक है, and this is the image of mother goddess. This is the image of a lady, ठीक है, and you just anticipated कि this must be used for some sort of religious use, right? But then again you found some literary source on it, and in the literary source you found a very different use of this. In that case, which one would be better? Like of course if you have been comparing these two and then you are coming to reaching up to your conclusion, juxtaposition. So instead of using just one set of sources, you have been using multiple set of sources, and then after analyzing them you have been coming up with the conclusion. आर्ग्यूमेंट, जक्सटापोजिशन. कोई भी आंसर लिखिए आप सोर्सेस पे, खत्म एक ही वर्ड पे होना चाहिए वो. दैट्स इट. यस. Yes, they were linked in this way. You just tell me. I just wanted to convey this idea. If you'll read the literature or a kind of literary references of these rulers, so they are always presented as a kind of very powerful rulers, right? But just tell me one thing, did the resource allow them to be this much powerful ruler? So in the initial time we always considered कि the Chola and the Pandya rulers, they were the greater rulers, ठीक है. But then when we tried to understand the state formation with respect to the available resources, then we realized कि how come it's possible for them. So initially we have been keeping that society in the category of state society. Later on we revised our theory and we started putting them in the category of somewhere in between the chiefdom and the state society. That's the difference between these two. Got the point? Yes. वो लेटर चोलाज है मैंक, ठीक है, वो बाद के चोला है, वो पार्ट 2 है, वो पार्ट 2 है. नहीं यार देखो, कॉलोनाइजेशन कब कहते हैं, जब मैंने आपको बंदी बना लिया, ठीक है, और हर रोज आपसे मैं बोलता हूं कि 100 रुपये निकालो. गेटिंग माई पॉइंट? मैंने आपके पॉलिटिकल, इकोनॉमिक, सोशल, कल्चरल सिस्टम को कैप्चर कर लिया और मैं आपका एक्सप्लॉयटेशन कर रहा हूँ. दैट्स कंसिडर्ड टू बी कॉलोनाइजेशन, ठीक है. अगर आपने किसी जगह से लिंक कर लिया और उससे कुछ फ़ायदा मिल रहा है आपको, दैट्स नॉट कंसिडर्ड टू बी कॉलोनाइजेशन. देयर वाज वन पीरियड व्हेन द मॉडर्न एक्सपेंशन वाज आल्सो कंपेयर्ड विद द कॉलोनाइजेशन. उसको इंपीरियलिज्म कहा गया था. हमारे टाइम पे एक क्वेश्चन पूछते थे कि टू व्हाट एक्सटेंट यू बिलीव दैट द एक्सपेंशन ऑफ द मॉडर्न स्टेट वाज नथिंग बट कॉलोनाइजेशन और इंपीरियलिज्म. But then, like, when any ruler is expanding his state, like, he doesn't do it for the colonizing or for exploiting this region here. It's considered to be part of his territory, and the way he was responsible for the subjects of the previous region, in the same way he is responsible to the people of the other regions also. So colonization is very different from the expansion of the state. Got that?
Sir, the definition of juxtaposition, is it only true in the field, in the context of history or another subject also? Comparative studies?
It's more applicable. Juxtapose, देखो, like whenever we have been reading history, we'll be collecting the keywords as per the topics, ठीक है. And while the evaluating your copy script, ठीक है, मैंने क्या कहा, नाचने से पहले वो धुन पकड़ना पड़ता है. यही है वो धुन पकड़ना, ठीक है. उस धुन में क्या होगा, हमें उस वर्ड्स के साथ खेलना आ जाएगा. Whenever somebody is evaluating your copy, of course you have given all the content, but if you have missed mentioning those words, in that case it is going to be against you, है ना. ये सारे वर्ड्स कैसे हैं, ये चमकाने वाले वर्ड्स हैं जो मैं अक्सर कहता हूँ, ठीक है. समझ गए ना, चमकाने वाले. वो देख के एक बार इवैल्यूएटर सोचेगा नहीं नहीं इसको आता है, ठीक है, अंडरस्टैंडिंग है इसको, आपको मार्क्स मिल जाएगा. तो दिखाने के दांत और होते हैं, चमकाने वाले दांत कुछ आते हैं. ये सब चमकाने वाले दांत हैं, ठीक है. ओके.